Welcome back to our workshop. Let's talk now about value promise. Let's think a little bit about where we left off. Previously, we've conducted a service artifact audit to kick us off, and we've created service slices in order to represent touchpoints. We mapped out a customer journey map over time, and we developed scenarios and storyboards, creating a picture of a narrative of the future. Now we're going to describe a value proposition, and this is probably the most important part of this entire promise. This is going to be why we've climbed that service stairway. We're going to leverage all of the artifacts we've created in order to create what's called a statement of value. People use services because they provide value, and this value is experienced over time and in support of user goals. And so our intent now is to develop these statements that articulate what someone will expect from a service, and to learn how to structure that value promise, vetting criteria for services success or failure. Here's the process that we're going to use to identify a value promise. 5 steps. First, revisit the top-line goal that we identified previously when we were creating that customer journey map. Identify service expectations and intent, develop the value proposition, and then identify the implications of the value proposition, which will lead directly to actionable objectives. Let's start by revisiting the top-line goal. We developed that top-line goal, that outcome that a customer is trying to achieve. And keep in mind that goals may change, but they rarely change when technology changes. They're often fixed, and tasks are the things that support change in goal. Goals may be utilitarian or emotional, and they may be realistic or aspirational. And so our top-line goal for our tattoo example was just that, to get a tattoo. Then identify service expectations by working backwards. Use the customer journey map's emotional journey line and identify expectations that are missed or matched related to each inflection point. Notice here it says, will it be clean and safe? Notice it says, will it hurt? Will they do a good job? Each one of these are internal dialogues that the customer is having as they're going through this process. And at each one of these inflection points, we can reposition their question, their internal dialogue, as a statement. Will it be clean and safe? Changes to, I expect it to be clean and safe. Will it hurt? Changes to, I expect it to be hurt, but I expect it to be bearable. What we're doing is we're honing in on the specific questions people have as they're going through a service, that inner dialogue, what is often called experience cognition. And we're honing in on that in order to reframe it as promises. Because pretty soon we're going to latch onto these statements and we're going to help make sure that these things come true. Identify intent by asking why. Next, explore the intention behind the top-line goal by asking and then answering the question, why? And we're going to look at it through a series of perspectives. We're going to look at it from social, emotional, and utilitarian perspectives. There's not a lot of utilitarian perspective going on here because tattoos are so culturally entwined, but there's certainly an emotional intent. I want to get a tattoo in order to gain self-confidence in my individuality. There's also a social intent. I might want to appear different or express my unique qualities and thoughts. We're going to identify intent by asking why, and then with the data you have and with your informed intuition, answer the question why. Write these in a small chart on a piece of scratch paper. Now develop the value promise, and it's going to take several iterations to get this right. A value promise is a single, concise statement that describes the functional and emotional value delivered as a result of using a service. It's a type of social contract between a company and a person, and it's going to be used in conjunction with business goals and organizational goals as a means of maintaining a user perspective through all levels of the organization. It's going to exist for individual products. It's also going to exist in order to form a value platform across products. And we're going to create it by combining all of the different work we've done so far. Frame the value promise as a statement that begins, "We promise to." Let's take a look at how it all adds together. We have our top-line goal. The goal is to get a tattoo. We have our intent. I want to get a tattoo in order to appear different, or to express my thoughts, or to gain self-confidence in my individuality. And I have my expectations. I expect it to be clean, safe, and beautiful. I expect it to hurt, but be bearable. And I expect that I'm brave enough to follow through with this. We have new touch points that we've created through our scenarios. We have a verbal script and empathy training for our front desk associate. And remember, we introduced an iPad into the experience. And so we can come up with our value promise. Think about the impact and implications of that value promise. We're asserting that as something that our company will do. We're saying that we promise this will happen. And if it doesn't happen, you have a right and you deserve to be upset. But if we deliver on this value promise, then there's an exchange. In this case, there's an exchange of money and time. The implications of the value promise prescribe how a company should behave. Identify those implications by identifying the things a company will now do in order to support the emergent value promise. And these statements typically take the form of, in order to achieve this, we will. You can think of them as sub-promises. If the value promise is our high-level, top-line promise, we have service implications like, we promise we will work with customers in order to customize their artwork, or call attention to safety measures. These are things that we're going to do in support of the value promise in order to make sure that it gets delivered properly. And so let's take a second and talk about why we're doing this. We've created a value promise in order to create a point of alignment and a North Star for future innovation. We're saying this is the direction of the company, of the product, and of the service experience, and so everything we do should ratchet up and align to this. We're going to create a filter for evaluating new ideas. Now we can compare and juxtapose great ideas that we might have against this value promise, and if they support it, then we should go do them, and if they don't, then we should ignore them. And finally, we can evaluate if we're actually delivering benefit to our customers, and if we're not, revise our offerings accordingly. This gives us some sort of criteria that we can use in order to assess. We can assess ourselves, our customers, we can assess our entire business based on this value promise. So we've progressed now up the service stairway. We've moved all the way from artifacts through touch points, time, narrative, and finally to value. People use services because they provide value, and this value is experienced over time and in support of user goals. This is probably the most important part of the entire service experience. The value promise becomes the thing that we can rally around and the thing that really anchors all of the work that the company does. So for your homework, I'd like you to create that value promise. First, revisit your top-line goal. Take a Sharpie, write it in really big letters on the top of large paper. And underneath that, write the service expectations and intent. And then develop that value proposition by crafting a statement of purpose. Revise the statement. Let's revise it at least 4 times. And for each revision, try to make the promise more succinct, more personal, and more tied directly to emotion. And then finally, identify implications of the value promise. Translate it into actionable objectives.